little repentant and a great deal ashamed. The rest was easy. The cronies were heavy stockholders in the P.C. Company. The P.C. Company owned fleets of river steamers and ocean-going craft, and in addition to farming the sea, exploited 100,000 square miles or so of the land that, on the maps of the geographers, usually occupies the white spaces. So the P.C. Company sent young Neil Bonner north, where the white spaces are, to do its work and to learn to be good like his father. 5 years of simplicity, close to the soil and far from temptation, will make a man of him, said old Neil Bonner, and forthwith crawled back among his roses. Young Neil set his jaw, pitched his chin at the proper angle, and went to work. As an underling, he did his work well and gained the commendation of his superiors. Not that he delighted in the work, but that it was the one thing that prevented him from going mad. The first year he wished he was dead. The second year he cursed God. The third year he was divided between the two emotions, and in the confusion quarreled with a man in authority. He had the best of the quarrel, though the man in authority had the last word, a word that sent Neil Bonner into an exile that made his own billet appear as paradise. But he went without a whimper, for the North had succeeded in making him into a man. Here and there, on the white spaces on the map, little circlets like the letter O are to be found, and appended to these circlets, on one side or the other, are names such as Fort Hamilton, Yanana Station, 20 Mile, thus leading one to imagine that the white spaces are plentifully besprinkled with towns and villages. But it is a vain imagining. 20 Mile, which is very like the rest of the posts, is a log building the size of a corner grocery with rooms to let upstairs. A long-legged cache on stilts may be found in the backyard, also a couple of outhouses. The backyard is unfenced and extends to the skyline in an unascertainable bit beyond. There are no other houses in sight, though the Toyots sometimes pitch a winter camp a mile or two down the Yukon. And this is 20 Mile, one tentacle of the many-tentacled P.C. Company. Here the agent, with an assistant, barters with the Indians for their furs, and does an erratic trade on gold dust basis with the wandering miners. Here also, the agent and his assistant yearn all winter for the spring, and when spring comes, camp blasphemously on the roof while the Yukon washes out the establishment. And here also, in the 4th year of his sojourn in the land, came Neil Bonner to take charge. He had displaced no agent, for the man that previously ran the post had made away with himself. "Because of the rigours of the place," said the assistant, who still remained, though the Toyots by their friars had another version. The assistant was a shrunken-shouldered, hollow-chested man, with a cadaverous face and cavernous cheeks that his sparse black beard could not hide. He coughed much, as though consumption gripped his lungs, while his eyes had that mad, fevered light common to consumptives in the last stage. Pentley was his name, Amos Pentley, and Bonner did not like him, though he felt a pity for the forlorn and hopeless devil. They did not get along together, these two men who, of all men, should have been on good terms in the face of the cold and silence and darkness of the long winter. In the end, Bonner concluded that Amos was partly demented and left him alone, doing all the work himself except the cooking. Even then, Amos had nothing but bitter looks and an undisguised hatred for him. This was a great loss to Bonner, for the smiling face of one of his own kind, the cheery word, the sympathy of comradeship shared with misfortune, these things meant much, and the winter was yet young when he began to realize the added reasons, with such an assistant, that the previous agent has found to impel his own hand against his life. It was very lonely at 20 Mile. The bleak vastness stretched away on every side to the horizon. The snow, which was really frost, flung its mantle over the land and buried everything in the silence of death. For days it was clear and cold, the thermometer steadily recording 40 to 50 degrees below zero. Then a change came over the face of things. What little moisture had oozed into the atmosphere gathered into dull gray, formless clouds. It became quite warm, the thermometer rising to 20 below, and the moisture fell out of the sky in harsh frost granules that hissed like dry sugar or driving sand when kicked underfoot. After that it became clear and cold again, until enough moisture had gathered to blanket the earth from the cold of outer space. That was all. Nothing happened. No storms, no churning waters and thrusting forests, nothing but the machine-like precipitation of accumulated moisture. Possibly the most notable thing that occurred through the weary weeks was this gliding of the temperature up to the unprecedented height of 15 below. To atone for this, outer space smote the earth with its cold till the mercury froze and the spirit thermometer remained more than 70 below for a fortnight, when it burst. There was no telling how much colder it was after that. Another occurrence, monotonous in regularity, was the lengthening of the night, till day became a mere blink of light between the darkness. Neil Bonner was a social animal. The very follies for which he was doing penance had been bred of his excessive sociability. And here, in the 4th year of his exile, he found himself in company, which were to travesty the word, with a morose and speechless creature in whose somber eyes smoldered a hatred as bitter as it was unwarranted. And Bonner, to whom speech and fellowship were as the breath of life, went about as a ghost might go, tantalized by the gregarious revelries of some former life. In the days his lips were compressed, his face stern, but in the night he clenched his hands, rolled about in his blankets, and cried aloud like a little child. And he would remember a certain man in authority and curse him through the long hours. Also, he cursed God. But God understands. He cannot find it in his heart to blame the weak mortals who blaspheme in Alaska. And here, to the post of 20 Mile, came Jees to trade for flour and bacon and beads and bright scarlet cloths for her fancy work. And further and unwittingly, she came to the post of 20 Mile to make a lonely man more lonely, make him reach out empty arms in his sleep. For Neil Bonner was only a man. When she first came into the store, he looked at her long, as a thirsty man might look at a flowing well. And she, with the heritage bequeathed to her by Spike O'Brien, imagined daringly and smiled up into his eyes, not as the swart-skinned people should smile at the royal races, but as a woman smiles at a man. The thing was inevitable, only he did not see it, and fought against her as fiercely and passionately as he was drawn towards her. And she? She was Jees, by upbringing wholly and utterly a Toyat Indian woman. End of The Story of Jees, Part 1.